Hello, everyone. So, does the Mel Robbins 5-second rule to relieve anxiety work? Will it help you recover? This is a question I get asked a lot. So, I'm doing a video on it because I think it's quite an interesting concept. Perhaps it has more depth to it than some people think. And I'm sure some people do use it to, help with their anxiety. Some people claim it will help them recover from it. So great. Mel Robbins herself says it helped her be anxiety free, and I have no reason to doubt that. This video is not meant to be critical of it at all, but it does come with a good promise that you can relieve anxiety in 5 seconds. That's the 5-second rule. So I'm going to talk about what it is, perhaps the good bits about it, what I think is useful. Maybe if you do use it and you have benefit, well, if you do use it and have benefit, keep using it. I mean, there's no reason not to. If it has helped you recover from anxiety, full stop, I wouldn't even bother watching this video because you've got a method that works for you. But I always like to open things up, explain them with transparency, and talk about how the principles that I talk about in terms of anxiety recovery could help you, add to this technique if you're using it, but also explain perhaps some of the gaps if there are any, but also the really useful bits about it. So I hope that makes sense as a starting point. But the 5-second rule, as Mel Robbins describes, is effectively when you feel some sort of anxiety in your system. And she's very good at talking about the physiological aspects of anxiety. So effectively, sensitization. She doesn't mention sensitization per se. She talks about agitation in your system, which I think is great. You start to feel butterflies, heart racing, etc. And then you start to worry about something, worry about how one of your kids is being taught by a teacher. That's the example she gives. Her method is before you get lost in all the worries. So Claire Weeks would say lost in all the second fear by being triggered by the physical symptoms. You use a trick in the brain to kind of almost break that state. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you feel the symptoms, and then you replace it with an anchor thought before you're off and running with the symptoms. The reason why she talks about an anchor thought, if I've got this right, feel free to correct me, I'm not an expert in her method. She says replace it with an anchor thought that's around excitement. Because the way she thinks about anxiety and excitement have the same symptoms. They're the same thing in terms of how it manifests physiologically. There's adrenaline surging, there's excitement, tension in the body, perhaps. You might think of it in a good way, but when you're nervous in a good way about something, nervous excitement, she says you just simply replace it with an excitement anchor thought or a more positive anchor thought, such as you imagine your child being happy and healthy and thriving at school instead of being targeted by the teacher or being bullied or whatever else it might be. So that's essentially the method. So what I think is really good is that she's very good at describing, in terms of the context of the method, that anxiety versus maybe just everyday worries is very physiological. And she also says that you can't just replace one thought with a negative thought with a positive thought, because your system has to calm down. Your system's like a freight train, or your brain's like a freight train coming at you. So she says absolutely correctly, it's not just easy to replace one negative thought with a positive thought or challenge the negative thought like people recommend with cognitive behavioral therapy. So I think she's on the money with that one. I think that's a very good differentiation. But obviously what happens then when she talks about the 5-second rule, it's a trick in the brain. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It buys yourself some space. You're almost breaking the cycle. So you're not so much lost in the thinking, which I think is good. That's great. What I would say for those who struggle with the technique or it hasn't worked for them, if you like the idea of it, what I would do is overlay the principles I talk about onto it, if you really want to see if it can work for you. And that of Claire Weeks, and that would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go loose and allow. You probably know what I'm going to say if you're familiar with my videos, because Mel Robbins talks about the physiological screaming of your body, the excitement in your body, that's what I talk about, is bluffing you into worry about this thing, current trigger. And it's not enough to just replace it with an anchor thought. We have to deal with the adrenaline behind it. So I would say once you've maybe the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 has at least helped you become aware. So it stopped you adding second fear. It buys you time, creates a bit of space so you can become aware that, oh, I'm just anxious. And now I'm going to go loose, slow down, because the way I talk about it, it's just sensitization and adrenaline. So I would argue that could be your anchoring thought. If you try and replace it with a more positive thought, or a thought that tricks your brain into being excited versus scared, that might work if your sensitization levels are lower. And so maybe you're not in the what you might call the anxiety state. Maybe you don't have a fully sensitized nervous system, and we're talking about using it for everyday worries. That might help you. You might redirect your thoughts, fine. Sensitization is high, and the adrenaline's still surging, your body's still screaming at you, you're feeling really agitated. Replacing the anxious thought with an anchoring thought of excitement is a lot of hard work, and the body won't settle down straight away, at least in my view, when you're highly sensitized. Again, if it works for you, great, continue. But what you could do is go, I'm going to go loose and allow and deal with the sensitization. Remind yourself what it is, as I talk about. What is anxiety? It's just cumulative stress on the nervous system causing sensitization. It's going to go loose, allow it. And my anchoring thought, instead of being having to, use the effort to try and think of an excited thought that I'm trying to be excited about instead of scared of, I can just go, this is just adrenaline. Do what you need to do. I'm going to go loose, allow, slow down. In time past, I know the same thought won't feel as scary. It's just adrenaline. As you get practice, it's just sensitization. I'm going to go loose and allow. Because if you replace it with an anchoring thought and it doesn't feel good straight away, then that opens the door to adding second fear, as Claire Weeks talks about. The anchoring thought might be, imagining your son, happy and thriving at school. But what if he doesn't thrive, if your body's still agitated? Should I take him out of the school? What sort of mum am I if I don't? What happens if I don't address this now? And so I think it just leaves the door open potentially, particularly the higher the sensitization levels are in your body. The way I think about this, the allow, go loose, let it all happen approach is kind of nipping it off at the bud a bit earlier. When I'm thinking about, sensitization and higher levels of anxiety. So again, the technique that she recommends has clearly worked for some people. It seems to work for her from what she says. Maybe I would say it would work. It works fine, perhaps, if your sensitization levels are lower and you're able to do it more intellectually. But for the anxiety state, as I think about it, if you deal with the sensitization, allow, go loose, you're nipping it off at the bud a lot earlier in the process. You don't need to replace the negative thought with an anchoring thought. I think she does a great job of talking about the agitation in the system, and fine to equate it with excitement, but we don't need to trick the brain if we know what fundamentally anxiety is. It's just a sensitized nervous system already tricking you into worrying about things that you don't need to. And that's, to my mind, a slightly more powerful starting point. So I hope that helps. If what I talk about is new to you, please do watch the Anxiety Cure video series where I explain all of this, and I've also got a 30-minute guided practice on how to do what I've just described, particularly for higher levels of sensitization you might have in your body. But otherwise, I wish you all the best either way. If you've got any questions, comments, let me know. But I look forward to seeing you again soon, hopefully. Take care.